It's fair to say that superheroes have become modern-day Greek legends. Pillars of justice fighting an idealized evil while teaching life lessons and instilling and inspiring a sense of moral justice. The comic book genre has undergone many changes in both cinema and comic, and to remain relevant and fresh, these heroes have matured with the times, gaining more depth, audience, and bleeding into every media form to survive. Cinema's take on these characters varies from era to era, starting specifically with the original Superman.
This year, Superman brings you the gift of flight.
The film Superman is seen less so as a comic book film and more as a Hollywood effect show. It was sold more as the then impressive gimmick of making a man fly, and fly he did. That's some impressive effects. That's because around this time period, Hollywood with this kind of genre was still in its experimental phase. It was exploring the limits of the medium. In terms of effects, in terms of character, in terms of genre, which was more important than ever back in the Hollywood studio system. Hollywood had just lately escaped the studio system, and so films like this could be made. This film was sold and received much like, say, Avatar, with focus on the groundbreaking effects rather than narrative or character. Even someone like Superman could be taken seriously and wow an audience. Oh boy, Marge, that man's flying, he is. You could get away with not making Citizen Kane in spandex, because Superman was true to the appeal of the original comics, to be fair. The early appeal of Superman wasn't a dilemma and moral code, it was seeing a super fantastical man do the impossible, because, well, it was new. But Superman doesn't cut it forever. Comics in the next few decades slowly realised that they could not simply sell stories of a man who inexplicably turned into a Norse god and hit things with a hammer, or Superman who could do anything the plot called for. Even the then audience of children needed something a bit more substantial. The times were changing, and to stay with the times, comics needed to become something more than the Beano, you know? You see the Beano around these days? Exactly. That was comics. Film would catch on to this fact a little bit later. In the world of film, things weren't so different. The golden age of Hollywood was over, and the action genre was firmly rooted in convention. The likes of Predator, Rambo, and Die Hard had all been huge action hits. One-liners and guns and masculinism galore, and they showed no signs of changing. And it is the curse with films, heavily reliant on convention, and the times, they age badly, which creates the awkward teenager phase of action cinema in the 1990s. Most flicks are trying and failing to be Die Hard. Even Die Hard is trying to be Die Hard at this point. They've lost something they can't get back. The infamous mix of action and comedy begins, and action films, at least iconically, start to become a thing of the past. Whilst action stars like Van Damme and Schwarzenegger were, for the most part, joke actors, they could also be taken very seriously. But they begin to be replaced by action stars like, say, Jackie Chan. Current action films do exist, but none of them really take off, and if they do, it's because of other reasons and not the fact that they were an action movie. Cough Matrix, cough Mission Impossible. And it's around this time that the superheroes started to rear their head. So in a strange way, it's comparable that the 80s films that the superheroes would soon replace, and the comic book heroes themselves, were seen as comical and silly now, and needed to be replaced with something new. Now, it's somewhat controversial and hard to pinpoint exactly which was the first true superhero film. Was it Raimi's Spider-Man? Nolan's Dark Knight? Iron Man? Was it Superman 4, Quest for Peace? No, it's not that one. It's actually earlier than all of that. The man most influential to the modern perception of the genre is actually Tim Burton.
What are you? I'm Batman.
The 1989 Batman, although overshadowed by a certain Dark Knight these days, was hugely influential. An early Tim Burton shies away from the camp and amps up the gothic, resulting in the first cinematic take on a Caped Crusader.
Wait till they get a load of me.
Whilst not taking the absolute bleak approach that would catch on later, Burton saw something very real and dark in bats, and wrote it in the style of a neo-thriller, albeit with a killer clown and a batsuit, a gangster kind. All I'm saying is it's not very Dark Knight, is it?
Because, you know, here you're a movie based on a comic book, but you're trying to give it a little bit more psychological structure, you know, base to it, without going too far. So, you know, we went in with a firm idea of what we wanted to do, but then, you know, in terms of movement, in terms of, you know, tones and all, there's a lot of just discussions and really just trying things.
The age rating and the casting of actors such as Jack Nicholson blends the concept of high and low art. You will get scenes like this, but you will also get an equal amount of moments like this.
Thank God you're alive. Fried. Is that what you heard?
So it's respecting the source material whilst paving the way to a whole genre waiting to happen. And then, enter Marvel, showing up like a rookie art dealer, a big CV, but clumsily just like drops everything on the first day. And in his first sneeze, he sells the rights of the series to Universal. Many attempts were made with the likes of Fantastic Four, Hulk, and Spider-Man. Whilst they were met with relative success, other than Hulk, sorry Hulk, they added little to their genre, written and produced in a cheesy tone. These early attempts were quickly dated and showed no signs of connecting or being anything substantial. They are light-hearted and capture an early comic book feel, and so they're unique in that sense. And I don't think they should be immediately ruled out, but they are very much comic book movies in the way that a film business sees a comic book. It's pretty clear that they were just made to use a recognisable name and franchise and ship it off to make an instant film. It wasn't just Marvel either. The treatment of DC characters was not much better. This era has Superman Returns and Batman and Robin. Yeah. Batman and Robin specifically is everything most superhero films now try not to be, and with good reason. Silly action, disregarding the source material, immature dialogue, and visuals right down to bat nipples and bat credit card. Not exactly Dark Knight, is it?
Then I really want to apologize, because it wasn't my intention.
It's kind of pointless to point at it now and go, bad. But as admitted by its director, it was made to sell toys. And sell toys it did. It is pointless to berate a film when the director himself admits that it was just to make toys. Back in comic land, comic book heroes not only need depth now, but have come so far that they need something new, some new life. A big problem with comic books is that they're not generally taken seriously, and so some superheroes and storylines start to venture into drama. And I don't mean soap opera bullshit kind of drama, but Marvel starts to go real. DC sees the potential in a slightly gothic and darker Batman. Superheroes on Marvel's side start to surface as well. Nick Fury, Punisher, Wolverine, Deadpool. People are starting to become invested in a slightly grittier, darker kind of hero. One that can blur the boundaries between good and evil. An anti-hero, even in some cases. It does also lead to the fact that comics can be starting to be taken seriously. Not just yet, but when the films get hold of it in a public view, comics are becoming an integral part of our media society. Back in filmland, around this era, the action genres conceived a new kind of action hero, the modern era being one of Jackie Chan's and Tom Cruise's. But it is a shadow of what it used to be. Although not entirely yet, the signs are starting to show that superheroes are replacing the action blockbusters. And I think that's important to register when watching films like the early Spider-Man, Fantastic Four, and Batman Returns. People were experimenting with the genre, it was brand new. But soon after this prepubescent Warner Brothers phase, the genre would finally be in stable hands. Both Iron Man and Batman Begins start the real golden age of the bond between comic and film. They started taking the first baby steps of the official new comic book film. Batman Begins was director Christopher Nolan going full grit and showing that a concept like Batman had the capability to be taken seriously, often compared now to the likes of Godfather and Shawshank. He decided to embrace the modern, dark, edgy superhero archetype. And it works. A film with this much reception can't be considered a failure for the genre as a whole. If Tim Burton's Batman was the first staple that the public could enjoy superhero films, then Batman The Dark Knight was probably the critics' first hint at that fact. Batman Begins showed a fixation on the character, doing a full coverage of the origin and development of Bruce Wayne. Even Tim Burton's revolutionary attempt skipped the origin story altogether, showing a more subtle Batman, if light on character exploration. All I'm saying is it's not very Dark Knight, is it? With Dark Knight, you get everything. There's an overindulgence in characters when they literally speak the symbolic themes taking place. Iron Man, on the other hand, was Marvel's ambassador into the new age. Their first in-house film builds an instant classic from a lesser-known property, and looking back, it was a bit of a risky yet genius move. Iron Man was their attempt to become organised and firmly root the world cinematically. It's rare that such an experimental film also had so much riding on it and could also be such a blockbuster success. The sassy screenplay and witty dialogue of Shane Black, the modern day themes of real terrorists as opposed to Dr. Evil or whatever, and the Han Solo-esque rogue nature of the protagonist was the breath of fresh air audiences were just grateful for. Even as early as the first Marvel film, the inclusion of Nick Fury promised audiences that this was the start of something big. And it expanded to Captain America, Hulk and Thor respectively, each adding new territory to the genre. But ultimately at this point, superhero films have been going for quite a while. But Phase 1 and Phase 2 came quite late in the game, even though this is what we all associate as the start today.
When it was Thor.
All Phase 1 and 2 films end up coming down to one big final fight, and slowly even the audience is becoming desensitized to the conventions of a superhero film. Superhero films has become its own genre. The perfect hybrids of action, thriller, comedy, romance, and they're interchangeable with many other labels. So as a result of being their own genre, they also come with their own set of post-stamps and cliches. I could just lay them out for you, but instead the 2008 Hulk film does it for me. It's not a bad film by any means, but it's quite literally the most textbook conventional film of its kind. So you can play a drinking game when you spot all of the conventions. Tell me how many superhero films you know that have a hero trying to resolve a psychological problem at the start, a current day origin story, long over-the-top credit sequence, no time lapses, final villain showdown, collateral damage, drink extra if it's often associated with landmarks, sidelined love interest, 3 run-ins with enemy, round 1, round 2 and round 3 respectively, MacGuffin objects, final villain's motives barely explained. This one is, that's insane how much that one happens. Oh, my liver hurts. Signs of these cliches are already beginning to form, and although some films get criticism for this, it hasn't begun to show any real problem just yet. The superhero genre, by replacing the traditional action genre, inherited some of its flaws that can grow stale fast. That said, a lot of care has been put into the films of Phase 2 to prevent this from happening. Disney and Marvel have a long game plan ahead of them, and they're mixing up the style. A range of writers and directors bring their new material whilst playing and mixing with other genres. Whilst Hulk and Iron Man are firmly rooted in the base genre they created, series like Thor can be labelled as the fantasy genre, more Lord of the Rings than Cape Crusader. The first Thor was a fish-out-of-water comedy. Captain America, the First Avenger, was primarily a World War II film, and Winter Soldier plays out like a 70s political spy thriller. And future endeavours such as Guardians and Ant-Man seem to be mixing up the format entirely. And honestly, the future of the genre is uncertain. Marvel have got it all planned out until about a decade down the line. And considering the range and depth of the Marvel catalogue, this is very possible. But it's important to remember Hollywood is a fickle and uncertain mistress. It's a shallow industry. All it takes is one big failure to put the whole genre on ice. Which is why I personally believe the next phase will be the most important. Comics are infinite and can be resetted at will, but films are limited. Actors like Chris Evans and Chris Hemsworth will not be on demand forever due to factors such as fame or age. Downey Jr., for instance, is already in his 50s and has risen to A-list fame so rapidly it's been hard enough to get him even back for the Avengers 2. So external factors can become this franchise's and this genre's downfall. With new territory such as Doctor Strange, Guardians of the Galaxy and Ant-Man, we're getting entire new worlds. And with the possibilities that these series carry, we can expect some real new stuff coming from Marvel and also the superhero genre in future years. As you may have noticed, whilst this editorial may have started more in DC's balance, the future of the superhero genre does lie with Marvel. That's not favoritism, that's not bias. Comic-wise and film-wise, DC seem to be in a mess. They're unorganized, sexist, scrambling to make a script, and anything that they do produce will simply be trying to catch up with Marvel's Avengers. This isn't ideal. In a perfect world we'd have representation of everyone. What they make will be important in the genre's future, but the real destiny of it depends in Marvel's hands. With Doctor Strange you've got a supernatural element. Ant-Man will have a strange tone even if the director did drop out. Black Panther, go full Dark Knight. All of these are just ideas. But if Marvel keeps expanding and throwing in new genres to keep the material fresh, we will be seeing a lot more superhero films in the years to come.